Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with another video from History Matters, and this time, why wasn't Iran colonized? A short animated documentary. I don't really have a good guess as to this one. I'm going to well, maybe it could be a good guess. We'll see how accurate it is. I'm going to assume it has to do with spheres of power, right? In the time of the colonial period, right? You have Russia in that region. We have Russia, the Ottomans, it's basically 1800s when I think Iran was likely to be the most colonized would be the 1800s. So we have, the British Raj, we have Britain and India and Pakistan. We have Russia and we have the Ottoman Empire all in that region. So I think, right, had either of those, if one of those people had tried to colonize Iran, the two others would have beaten them up, right? So there was kind of that sort of, I guess, nuclear sort of uh, mutually assured destruction sort of guarantee in regards to Iran's ability to stay uncolonized. And then when the 1900s came around, I think colonization took on a different picture, right? We see that, the United States had done a little something, and then a revolution happened, and now Iran hates us, which, valid. Um, but yeah, that's my guess. I'm gonna assume balance of power in the region, mutually assured sort of destruction there is my guess. Let's dive in and find out how close I am, how far I am.
In the age of imperialism, there were few places in Asia which got through it without coming under direct rule by a foreign power. Now, in the Middle East, there was one glaring exception Iran, who was never conquered even briefly. But the question is, why? Why was Iran never colonized? So, as of the 19th
19th
century, the
century.
borders of Iran, or Persia as it was known then, looked like this. It was ruled by the Qajar dynasty, whose primary concern wasn't European powers but the Ottoman Empire to its west. However, as the Ottomans declined, two more powers stepped into the void to potentially threaten Persia. The first was the Russian Empire, whose expansion eastward and southward brought it into a series of conflicts with the Persians. By the mid-19th century, the Russians had taken this territory and was now a major trade partner of Persia. And it was shortly after this that Persia came into contact with Britain, who clashed with them, and the Qajar dynasty lost control of these economically important lands. Now, the rulers of Persia at this point weren't silly, and they knew that Persia was declining and that the two powers weren't going to stop until they had control of Persia in its entirety. Persia's rulers knew that they couldn't put up much resistance to either empire in the event of an invasion, and so they did the only thing that they could play both Britain and Russia off against each other. And
Yup,
this did
okay.
work for a time, but over the course of the late 19th century, Britain's economic control continued to grow, and thereafter something important happened. Persia struck oil. A lot of
Oh,
oil, which other nations wanted. Britain's economic influence led to the Persian government signing over all oil rights in the early 20th century to the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, nowadays called BP. 1907 also
that's oh. I pretty much buy all my gas from BP. Well, I guess can't really avoid a problematic oil company. You're kind of screwed. You kind of have to, any of the oil companies you buy from are going to be terrible. So, no ethical consumption in the oil industry.
saw the closest thing to the colonization of Persia, the Anglo-Russian Convention, in which Britain and Russia carved the country up into spheres of economic influence with a little remaining free. Thus, Persia's position as a state which sat partially in both nations' spheres of influence kept it from formally being an imperial domain of either. However, when World War I rolled up, it did cause issues. When the Ottoman Empire declared war on the Entente, Persia, being somewhat aligned with them, became a target. The British and Russians maintained their zones of influence there, and the Ottomans invaded and occupied some of the eastern parts of the state. When the
I
Russian
remember
Empire
that.
collapsed in the wake of the Bolshevik Revolution, its forces left Persia, and the Ottomans would soon after go on to lose the war and break apart. This left only Britain, who thanked Persia for its sacrifice and hard work and made sure that as a result it would be left independent forevermore. Just kidding. Instead, what happened was that Britain tried to make it into an unofficial protectorate by enforcing its economic hegemony there. The ruler of Persia at this point, Ahmad Shah, agreed to these terms because he didn't feel like dying, but they weren't implemented for very long. This was because the US, France, and the newly formed USSR decried the treaty as amounting to essentially annexation, and it was soon afterwards abandoned. And after this, Britain subsequently withdrew, leaving a somewhat independent Persia. Thus, Iran did what many others failed to do: it survived the age of imperialism. And the reason why Iran was never conquered in its entirety was that it played both Britain and Russia off against each other. This meant that much of the country would be under the effective economic control control of one of these two powers, but it did spare Iran the same fate as places like India or Syria, which was something. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Okay, so I guess, all right. So ultimately, this question does come down to what do we consider colonization? If we, right, so in regards to this question, how they answered it, they took it by the most sort of by historical, literal sense in that it is an active occupation. Moving into the 20th century onwards, more specifically, right, and we saw that there even in the late 19th century, where Britain sort of had economic control over Iran. Same with Russia for a time there up until the collapse of the Russian Empire in 1917. Um, so an argument can be made that Iran was technically colonized to an extent. It suffered under well. Then we enter what is the difference between imperialism and colonization, right? Like, is colonization only the active occupation, and then which, you know, yes, I think I would lean towards that. Whereas imperialism is a more broad term and can apply to the soft power that is economic influence. Um, and like soft power, hard power is like something that is, I guess, physical, definite, that you can actively like really see as occupation, right? Troops moving in, that sort of thing, settlements happening. Soft power would be like, cultural, economical, um, sort of thing. So, um, why wasn't Iran colonized? I would say they were not colonized, though I would definitely say they were imperialized, and pretty much under the control of Britain through economic means for a time. Well, even after the official treaties were done away with, the argument probably could be made that they were so dependent upon Western economic trade that they kind of had to be, essentially nothing really changed aside from the officialness of it all, I guess, in terms of treaties. So I guess I wasn't too far off. Iran did try to play Russia and Britain against one another, but that didn't really work out too well in their favor. I mean, it allowed them to maintain their form of government as long as they played nice with the British and Russians. Um, so that was why Iran wasn't colonized, a short animated documentary by History Matters. I hope you guys enjoyed this as well as I did. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.